Captain Jake Morrison stood at the front window of his ship and watched the alien vessels move past them like silver birds in space. Their ship, the UE's Resilience, looked like a beat-up old truck parked next to shiny new sports cars. The metal hull was patched in dozens of places with whatever materials the crew could find. Some patches were different colors, making the ship look like a quilt made from spare parts. "Captain, you should hear what they're saying about us," said Commander Lisa Barnes as she walked up beside him. Her face showed worry and anger mixed together. She had been listening to the alien radio chatter for the past hour, and none of it was good. Jake sighed and rubbed his tired eyes. He had known this would happen when Earth finally got invited to the big alien meeting. The Galactic Council had been around for thousands of years, and humans had only been flying between stars for 50 years. Their ships were built from whatever they could find after the war that nearly destroyed Earth. Every piece of metal, every wire, every bolt had been scavenged from the ruins of their home planet. "What are they calling us this time?" Jake asked, though he already knew it would not be nice. Lisa looked at her tablet where the translation software was working to turn alien words into English. "The Velkari are calling our ship metal garbage, held together by human dreams and tape. The Zephyrians want to know how we made it through space without falling apart into little pieces." Jake looked out at the alien ships again. The Velkari vessels were long and sleek, like deadly spears made of dark metal. They had weapons that could destroy planets and shields that could stop almost anything. The Zephyrian ships looked like they were made of crystal and light. They could disappear and reappear wherever they wanted, making them almost impossible to fight. Then there was the Resilience. It was half the size of the smallest alien ship, covered in patches and held together with hope and human stubbornness. The fusion engines made weird noises that worried Jake every time they started up. The weapons were old Earth military guns that had been taken off destroyed tanks and jets. Even the life support system came from an old space station that had been blown up in the war. "Sir," incoming message from Admiral Carter called out Ryan Torres from his seat at the communications station. He was young, maybe 25, and this was his first time away from Earth. His eyes were wide as he watched the alien ships move around them. "Put her on the main screen," Jake said. Admiral Helen Carter appeared on the screen. She was a tough woman in her 60s who had fought in the Earth Wars before becoming humanity's voice to the aliens. Her gray hair was pulled back tight, and her uniform was clean and pressed, unlike the patched work clothes most of the Resilience crew wore. "Captain Morrison, I hope you and your crew are ready for what's coming," she said. Her voice was calm, but Jake could see the worry in her eyes. "The other species are not taking us seriously. They think we're a joke." "We know, Admiral. We can hear their radio chatter," Jake replied. "It gets worse. The port control has put you in Section 7 of the docking bay. That's where they keep old ships that don't work anymore." Carter paused and looked angry. "They're treating us like we don't belong here." Jake felt his anger rise, but pushed it down. Getting mad would not help anything. What about the meetings? Are we still allowed to attend? Yes, but barely. Ambassador Stone is working hard to make sure we get a seat at the table, but it's not easy. These aliens have been flying through space since before humans learned to make fire. To them, we're children playing with toys. Danny Walsh, the chief engineer, spoke up from his station. "Admiral, my engines are running fine. This ship may look like junk, but she'll fly when we need her to." Carter smiled a little. "I know, Danny. Your work keeps us moving when we should have broken down years ago. But looking good is part of politics, and we don't look good next to their ships." Through the windows, Jake could see more alien vessels arriving. Each one was bigger and more impressive than the last. The Thorian Empire sent a ship that looked like a floating city. The Nexus Collective arrived in a vessel that seemed to be made of pure energy. Even the smaller ships from minor alien races looked more advanced than anything humans had ever built. "Captain, we're being scanned," announced Lieutenant Amy Foster. "From the sensor station. It's the Valkyrie flagship. They're taking detailed readings of our ship." On the communications channel, they could hear the Valkyrie discussing what they found. The translation software turned their clicking language into cold, mocking words. Primitive fusion drives from their early space age. Armor plating that appears to be repurposed from ground vehicles. Weapons that would be better suited for a museum than a starship. The alien voice paused. How did this thing even make it here without breaking apart? Lisa's hands closed into fists. "I'd like to show them how well our museum pieces work." "Easy, Commander," Jake said quietly. "Save that anger for when we might need it." Dr. Nancy Pierce, the ship's doctor, walked onto the bridge carrying her medical kit. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but Jake knew she was tough as nails. She had patched up the crew through 3 major system failures and a pirate attack. On the way to this meeting, "Captain, I've been monitoring the crew's stress levels," she said. "A constant mockery is getting to them. Some of the younger crew members are starting to doubt if we should even be here." Jake nodded. He had been worried about the same thing. The crew of the Resilience were good people, but most of them had never been away from Earth before. Hearing aliens laugh at their ship and their technology was hard on everyone's confidence. "Attention all ships," came a voice over the general communication channel. "This is War Master Thecalon of the Galactic Council Defense Committee. All vessels will proceed to their assigned positions for the opening ceremony." Jake watched as the alien ships moved into perfect formations. Each species had its own style, but they all looked professional and deadly. The Valkyrie ships formed sharp triangles that looked like they were ready to attack at any moment. The Zephyrians created flowing patterns that were beautiful to watch. Even the smaller alien fleets moved with precision that spoke of thousands of years of practice. "Where are we supposed to go?" Lisa asked. Ryan checked his communications board. "They want us to follow the Thorian supply ships to the back of the formation." The message was clear. Humans were not considered warriors or diplomats. They were cargo haulers at best. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he gave the order to move to their assigned position dot as the Resilience slowly moved through the alien fleet. Jake could see crew members on other ships, watching them through windows. Some pointed and seemed to be laughing. Others just stared like they were looking at something strange and primitive. "Captain," said Ben Howard from the weapons station. He was a former Earth military officer who had joined the crew when his Army unit was disbanded. "Request permission to run a full diagnostic on our weapons systems." "Granted." "Make sure everything is working perfectly," Jake replied. He had a feeling they might need those weapons sooner than anyone expected as they took their place at the back of the formation. Jake looked around at his crew. They were tired, frustrated, and embarrassed, but they were still here. They had not given up, even though every alien in the fleet thought they were a joke. "Listen up, everyone," Jake said, his voice carrying to every corner of the bridge. "I know what they think of us. I know what they think of our ship. But we're here, and we're going to show them what humans can do. This old ship has gotten us through everything space could throw at us. She's not pretty, but she's ours, and she's strong." The crew looked up at him, and Jake could see some of their confidence returning. "They think we're Junkyard scrap," he continued. "Maybe we are, but sometimes Junkyard scrap is exactly what you need to get the job done." The opening ceremony took place in the main hall of Concordia Prime, a massive space station that was bigger than most cities on Earth. Captain Jake Morrison walked beside Admiral Carter through corridors that sparkled with alien technology. The walls seemed to be made of living light, and the air felt cleaner than anything Jake had ever breathed. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the great hall. The Valkyrie stood in perfect rows, their dark armor making them look like an army of metal statues. The Zephyrians floated slightly above the ground, their crystal bodies catching and reflecting light in beautiful patterns. Other species that Jake had only seen in pictures filled the remaining spaces. "Remember, Captain," Admiral Carter whispered, as they found their seats in the back row, "we're here to observe and learn. Don't let them make you angry." Jake nodded, but he could already feel his temper rising. The human delegation had been given the worst seats in the hall, far from the main stage where the important discussions would happen. It was another insult to add to the growing list. War. Master Thecalon stepped up to the speaking platform. He was a massive Valkyrie, twice the size of a human, with scars covering his dark metal skin. His voice boomed through the hall without any need for amplification. "Welcome, warriors of the galaxy," he began. "We gather here as we have for 1,000 years to test our strength and share our knowledge. The war games will begin tomorrow, where each species will show their military power and tactical skill." Jake leaned forward in his seat. This was the first he had heard about any war games. Thecalon continued, "As tradition demands, each member species will demonstrate their capabilities through combat trials. These exercises help us understand each other's strengths and prepare for threats that may come from outside our borders." A Zephyrian delegate rose from the middle section. Her voice sounded like music mixed with wind chimes. "War Master, what of the newest members? Will they participate as well?" All eyes turned toward the human section. Jake felt hundreds of alien stares focused on him and his small crew. Admiral Carter sat up straighter, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. "The humans?" Thecalon's voice carried what sounded like amusement. "I suppose they could participate in the basic trials, though I wonder if their ship would survive even the simplest exercises." Laughter rippled through the alien delegates. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that adults might make when watching children play with toy soldiers. It was somehow worse than open mockery. Admiral Carter stood up slowly. "War Master, humanity requests full participation in the war games. We are members of this council, and we have the same rights as any other species." The laughter stopped. The hall became so quiet that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Thecalon stared at Carter for a long moment, his red eyes glowing brighter. "Admiral Carter, your courage is noted. But these are not training exercises. Ships have been damaged in past games. Some have been destroyed completely. We use real weapons, set to minimum power, but the danger is very real." "We understand the risks," Carter replied, her voice steady and strong. An older Thorian delegate spoke up from his position near the front. "Perhaps we could create special trials for the humans, something more suitable for their level of technology." Jake felt his anger spike. He started to stand, but Admiral Carter put a firm hand on his shoulder, keeping him in his seat. "We appreciate the concern," Carter said with ice in her voice, "but humans do not need special treatment. We will face the same trials as everyone else." Thecalon considered this for several long seconds. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. The human ship will participate in 3 trials. First, they will face automated defense drones. If they survive that, they will engage a single patrol vessel in simulated combat. The final trial will be determined based on their performance in the first 2. The ceremony continued with technical discussions about fleet movements and trade agreements, but Jake barely heard any of it. His mind was focused on the trials that would begin tomorrow. When they finally returned to the Resilience, he called an immediate meeting of all department heads. The ship's small conference room was cramped with 8 people sitting around a table that was meant for 6. Danny Walsh had oil stains on his uniformed from working on the engines. Dr. Pierce looked tired from treating crew members who were suffering from stress and anxiety. Ben Howard sat with perfect military posture, but Jake could see the worry in his eyes. "You all heard what happened in the ceremony," Jake began. "Tomorrow we're going to be fighting for our lives, and more importantly, we're fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy." "Captain," Danny said, "I've been running diagnostics all day. Our systems are working, but they're not designed for combat against advanced alien technology. Our weapons are decades behind theirs." "Our shields are even worse," added Amy Foster from the sensor station. "If they hit us with full-power weapons, even at minimum settings, we'll be in serious trouble." Jake looked around the table at his crew. These were good people who had volunteered to leave Earth and represent their entire species. They deserved to know exactly what they were facing. "Ben, what's your assessment of our combat capabilities?" Lieutenant Howard pulled out his datapad and scrolled through pages of analysis. "Honestly, Captain, it's not good. Our main guns are modified railguns that can punch through most armor, but we can only fire them a few times before they overheat. Our missile systems are reliable, but slow compared to alien point defense systems. And our maneuvering thrusters give us about half the acceleration of the smallest alien fighter." "What about our advantages?" Jake asked. The room fell silent. After a moment, Dr. Pierce spoke up. "We're stubborn. Humans don't give up easily." "That's not going to stop a plasma cannon," Danny muttered. "Actually, it might," said Ryan Torres, from his position at the end of the table. The young communications officer rarely spoke up in meetings, but now he had everyone's attention. "I've been listening to their radio chatter for weeks. These aliens have been fighting the same way for thousands of years. They follow rules and patterns. They expect their enemies to do the same." "Go on," Jake encouraged. "Humans don't follow patterns. We improvise. We change our minds. We do things that don't make sense, but somehow work." Ryan's voice grew stronger as he talked. "They've never fought anyone like us before." Lisa Barnes nodded slowly. "He's right. Every alien species we've studied has very formal combat doctrines. They fight like they're following a textbook. And we fight like we're making it up as we go along," Ben added with the first smile Jake had seen from him all day. Danny Walsh leaned back in his chair and grinned. "You know what? I've been thinking about this all wrong. They want to see what our primitive technology can do? Let's show them." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "I mean, we stop trying to make our ship work like theirs and start making it work like ours. We've got systems on this ship that would give their engineers nightmares, but they work because we make them work." Amy Foster looked up from her tablet. "I've been analyzing their scanning data. They completely missed half our systems because they're so different from what they expect to see. That's because half our systems are held together with Danny's special engineering tape," Lisa said. "Hey, that tape has saved our lives more times than I can count," Danny protested. But he was smiling. Jake felt something he hadn't experienced since they arrived at the station. Hope, not confidence exactly, but hope that maybe they could surprise everyone, including themselves. "All right, people. We have 18 hours before the first trial begins. Danny, I want you to make whatever modifications you think might help. Ben, work with Amy to plan tactical approaches that no alien has ever seen before. Ryan, keep monitoring their communications and look for anything that might give us an edge." "What about the rest of the crew?" Dr. Pierce asked. "Get them ready for anything. Make sure everyone knows that tomorrow we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting to prove that humans belong in this galaxy." As the meeting broke up, Jake stayed behind with Admiral Carter, who had been quietly observing from the corner. "Think we have a chance?" he asked her. Carter was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "Jake, I've seen humans do impossible things with broken equipment and pure determination. These aliens have no idea what they're about to face. Outside the conference room, the crew of the Resilience began preparing for the most important day in human history. In engineering, Danny Walsh and his team started making modifications that would have terrified any safety inspector. In the weapons bay, Ben Howard ran combat simulations that ignored every rule of space warfare. And on the bridge, Ryan Torres listened to alien communications and began to understand just how predictable their enemies really were. The trials would begin at dawn. Station time. The Resilience was ready to show the galaxy what Junkyard scrap could do when it was crewed by humans who refused to accept defeat. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Resilience as the ship moved slowly toward the testing area. Through the main window, he could see the trial zone marked by floating beacons that created a cube of space 10 kilometers on each side. Around the edges, dozens of alien ships waited to watch the humans embarrass themselves. "All systems ready, Captain," reported Danny Walsh from engineering. He had worked through the night, making changes to their ship. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but his voice was steady and confident. "Weapons are online," said Ben Howard, from the tactical station. "I've loaded our guns with the special rounds we discussed. They should give the aliens something to think about." Jake nodded and settled into his captain's chair. The first trial would begin in 5 minutes. They would face 12 Zephyrian hunter-killer drones, each one the size of a small fighter, but faster and smarter than anything humans had ever built. "Incoming transmission from the War Master," announced Ryan Torres. The main screen flickered and showed Thecalon sitting in his command chair aboard the Valkyrie flagship. Behind him, Jake could see other alien officers watching with interest. "Captain Morrison, you are about to face automated combat drones designed by the Zephyrian military. These machines have been used in real battles and have destroyed many enemy vessels. Are you certain you wish to proceed?" "We're ready, War Master," Jake replied. "Very well. The trial will begin when the drones activate. You must either destroy all 12 drones or survive for 15 minutes. If your ship suffers critical damage, the trial will end and medical teams will assist you." The screen went dark. Jake looked around his bridge at the crew he had come to trust with his life. Lisa Barnes was checking her console for the 100th time. Amy Foster was running final scans of the area. Even Dr. Pierce was on the bridge, ready to help with emergency medical care if things went wrong. "Here they come," Amy announced. 12 objects appeared at the far edge of the testing zone. At first they looked like tiny stars, but as they moved closer, Jake could see their real shape. Each drone was a work of art, made from what looked like living crystal that shifted and changed color as it moved. They flew in perfect formation, like a flock of deadly birds. "Distance to targets?" Jake asked. 8 kilometers and closing fast," Ben replied. "They're moving at 3 times our maximum speed." The drones spread out as they approached, no longer flying in formation, but moving in a complex dance that made it impossible to predict where any one of them would be in the next second. Jake had studied videos of these machines in action, but seeing them in person was completely different. "Captain, they're trying to jam our communications," Ryan reported. "I'm switching to the backup system Danny installed." "Good. Let them think they've cut us off from each other." The drones opened fire when they reached 5 kilometers. Beams of pure energy lanced out from each machine, bright enough to hurt the eyes even through the filtered windows. The first shots missed, but Jake knew that was just the machines learning his ship's movement patterns. "All hands, brace for combat maneuvers," Jake announced over the ship's communication system. "Ben, open fire with the port railguns. Lisa, give me a spiral descent and maximum thrust." The Resilience suddenly dropped and spun to the left, moving in a corkscrew pattern that no alien ship would ever attempt. The force of the maneuver pressed everyone against their seats, but Jake's crew had trained for this. They knew their ship could handle stresses that would tear apart more advanced vessels. 2 railgun rounds shot out from the Resilience at incredible speed. The drones tried to dodge, but they had calculated their movements based on energy weapons that traveled at the speed of light. They were not prepared for physical projectiles that moved in straight lines and could not be deflected by energy shields. The first round missed, but the second one struck a drone directly in its center. The beautiful crystal machine exploded into 1,000 glittering pieces that sparkled in the light of a nearby star. 1 down, 11 to go, Ben announced with satisfaction, but the remaining drones had already adapted. They began moving in even more complex patterns, and their energy beams started getting closer to their target. One shot grazed the Resiliences, HULL, leaving a glowing scar across the armor plating. "Danny, I need more power to the engines," Jake called out. "You've got it, Captain. But I can't promise how long the engines will hold together if we keep pushing them this hard." The ship's fusion drives roared louder, and the Resilience shot forward at a speed that surprised even Jake. The drones had to adjust their attack patterns again, giving the humans a few precious seconds. "Amy, are you tracking their communication?" "Signals?" Jake asked. "Yes, Captain. They're sending data to each other constantly, sharing information about our movements and weapons." "Can you disrupt those signals?" "Not with normal jamming equipment, but Danny installed something special for me." Amy's fingers flew over her console, activating a device that Danny had built from spare parts and human creativity. Instead of trying to block the drone signals, it began sending false information, making the machines think the Resilience was in 12 different places at once. The effect was immediate. 3 drones fired at empty space, while 2 others crashed into each. Other when their coordination failed. The remaining 7 machines quickly adapted, but they had lost their perfect teamwork. "Now's our chance," Jake said. "Ben, full spread with all weapons." The Resilience unleashed everything it had. Railgun rounds shot out like metal rain, while missile launchers fired their entire loads. Most of the shots missed, but the sheer volume of fire forced the drones to break formation and scatter. "Lisa, take us into the debris field from the destroyed drones," Jake ordered. "Captain, that's dangerous. Those crystal pieces could damage our hull. Trust me." The Resilience dove into the cloud of glittering debris, and immediately the remaining drones had trouble targeting them. Their sensors were designed to track ships in clear space, not to find targets hidden among reflective crystal fragments. "Danny, can you magnetize our hull?" "Already working on it, Captain." Within seconds, pieces of crystal debris began sticking to the outside of the ship. To the drone's sensors, the Resilience now looked like just another piece of wreckage floating in space. Jake waited until 3 drones moved close to investigate the strange readings, then gave the order to attack. The Resilience burst out of the debris cloud like a predator leaping from hiding. At close range, their weapons could not miss. 3 more drones exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The remaining 4 machines tried to retreat, but Ben Howard had anticipated this. He fired the ship's emergency flares, filling space with bright lights that confused the drone's optical sensors. "Amy, now would be a good time for that special surprise Danny mentioned," Jake said. Amy smiled and activated another of Danny's modifications. The crystal debris that had stuck to their hull suddenly shot away from the ship, accelerated by magnetic launchers that the engineer had hidden throughout the hull. The pieces of broken drone flew through space like bullets, and 2 of them struck the retreating machines. The last 2 drones tried one final attack, diving toward the Resilience at maximum speed, but Lisa Barnes was ready for them. She fired, the ship's maneuvering thrusters in a pattern that sent the Resilience spinning like a top. while Ben used the rotation to bring all their weapons to bear. Both drones died in the same second, torn apart by railgun fire and missile explosions. "Trial complete," came Vekilon's voice over the communication system. He sounded surprised and perhaps a little impressed. "All targets destroyed in 8 minutes and 37 seconds. This is well within acceptable parameters." Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. They were sweating and tired, but they were all smiling. They had done something that should have been impossible. "Incoming transmission from multiple alien ships," Ryan reported. "They want to know how we did that." "Tell them it's human engineering," Jake replied, "and that we're just getting started." On the main screen, he could see alien ships moving closer to get a better look at the resilience. The humans were no longer just a curiosity or a joke. They were something these advanced civilizations had never seen before, and that made them dangerous. Admiral Carter's voice came over a private channel. "Well done, Captain. But remember, that was just the first trial. The real test is still coming." Jake nodded and looked out at the alien fleet surrounding them. He could see the Valkyrie patrol ship that would be their opponent in the second trial. It was 3 times the size of the Resilience and armed with weapons that could destroy planets. "Danny, how are our systems holding up?" he asked. "Better than expected, Captain. These modifications are working even better than I hoped. Give me an hour to make some adjustments, and we'll be ready for whatever they throw at us next." You heard him, people. 1 hour to prepare for the next trial. But remember what we just proved. They may have better technology, but we have something they don't understand. We have human creativity, and sometimes that's the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. 1 hour later, Captain Jake Morrison watched as the Valkyrie patrol ship Dominance moved into position across the testing zone. The alien vessel was beautiful in a deadly way, like a sword made of black metal and starlight. It was twice as long as the Resilience and covered in weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. "Danny, please tell me you have some more surprises ready," Jake said into his communication headset. "Captain, I've been working on our systems since we got here. Some of the things I've done would make Earth engineers cry, but they should work." Danny's voice sounded tired but confident. "Just remember, we can't take a direct hit from their main guns. Even at minimum power, they could cut us in half." Jake nodded and looked around his bridge. The crew looked different now than they had an hour ago. They had beaten the drones, something no one had expected them to do. That victory had given them confidence, but it had also made them realize how dangerous this trial would be. "Incoming transmission," Ryan Torres announced. The main screen showed Commander Velther, the Valkyrie officer who would be trying to destroy them in the next few minutes. He was tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished metal, and eyes that glowed red in the darkness of his bridge. "Captain Morrison, I watched your performance against the drones. You fight in ways I have never seen before." Velther's voice was cold and precise. "However, drones are simple machines. I am not a machine. I have fought battles across 1,000 star systems. I will not underestimate you, as the drones did." "We're ready when you are, Commander," Jake replied. "The trial will begin in 60 seconds. Remember, this is live combat with weapons set to minimum lethal power. If you surrender, I will accept it and the trial will end." The screen went dark. Jake took a deep breath and looked at his crew one more time. "All right, people. This is what we came here to do. Amy, what can you tell me about their ship?" Amy Foster checked her sensors and frowned. "It's not good, Captain. They have energy shields that can stop anything we can throw at them. Their main weapons are plasma cannons that can fire every 3 seconds. And their engines give them twice our acceleration." "Ben, tactical analysis?" Lieutenant Howard pulled up his combat charts. Standard Velkari attack pattern will be to stay at long range and pound us with plasma fire. They'll try to keep their distance and use their superior firepower to wear. Use down. Then we don't let them stay at long range, Jake said. Lisa, as soon as the trial starts, take us straight at them. Maximum speed, no evasive maneuvers. Lisa Barnes looked surprised. Captain, that's suicide. They'll have clear shots at us the whole way. Trust me, I have a plan. The trial began without warning. One moment space was empty, except for the two ships, and the next moment the Dominants opened fire with all weapons. Bright beams of plasma energy shot across the void, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a small building. The Resilience charged straight toward the enemy ship like an ancient knight on horseback. Plasma beams flashed past the bridge windows, so close that Jake could feel the heat through the armor plating. One shot grazed their port side, sending sparks flying across the damaged control station. Hull breach on Deck 3, Dr. Pierce reported from her emergency medical station. No casualties, but we're venting atmosphere. Seal it off, Jake ordered. Danny, I need everything the engines can give me. You've got it, Captain. But I'm pushing the fusion drives way past their safety limits. If something goes wrong, we could lose main power completely. The Resilience shot forward even faster, closing the distance to the Dominants in seconds instead of minutes. Commander Velther had expected the humans to try evasive maneuvers, to dodge and weave while trying to get close. He was not prepared for a ship that ignored his weapons and came straight at him like a missile. 5 kilometers and closing. Amy announced. They're trying to change course to keep us at long range. Ben, fire everything we have. Don't aim for their hull. Aim for their weapon ports. The Resilience's railguns opened fire, sending metal projectiles at incredible speed toward the Velkari ship. The rounds struck the Dominance's energy shields and disappeared in flashes of light, but they served their purpose. Velther had to adjust his shields to handle the unexpected physical impacts. Ryan, are you monitoring their internal communications? Yes. Captain, they're confused by our attack pattern. The commander is ordering his crew to prepare for close combat, but they've never trained for it. Jake smiled grimly. The Velkari were used to fighting enemies who followed the same rules they did. Long-range duels between ships that stayed far apart and traded shots until one side won. They had never faced an enemy crazy enough to charge straight into their weapons. 3 kilometers, Amy reported. Captain, they're powering up their main plasma cannon. If that hits us ... it won't hit us. Lisa, emergency dive on my mark. Danny, cut all power to the engines and redirect it to our magnetic systems. Captain, what are you planning? Lisa asked. Something stupid that might just work. Mark. The Resilience suddenly dropped toward the planet below, diving at an angle that brought them under the Dominance's main guns. At the same time, Annie cut power to their engines and sent all that energy to the magnetic systems that normally held loose objects in place during combat. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every piece of metal debris in the area, every loose bolt and fragment from the earlier drone battle, suddenly shot toward the Resilience like iron filings toward a magnet. Within seconds, the human ship was surrounded by a cloud of spinning metal fragments. Now, Lisa, straight up, full thrust. The Resilience rocketed upward, carrying its cloud of debris with it. The Dominance tried to track them with its weapons, but the metal fragments scattered their targeting sensors and absorbed their energy beams. Ben, do you have a clear shot at their engine ports? Negative, Captain. Their shields are still up. Then we make our own opening. Danny, overload the magnetic system and launch all that debris at their ship. Captain, that will burn out half our systems. Do it. Danny pushed the magnetic launchers far beyond their design limits. The cloud of metal fragments shot away from the resilience like bullets from a giant shotgun, each piece moving fast enough to punch through armor. Plating the Dominance's shields flared as thousands of metal fragments struck them from all directions. The energy barriers had been designed to stop large, powerful weapons, not clouds of tiny projectiles. One by one, the shield generators overloaded and failed. "Their shields are down," Amy announced with excitement. "Ben, target their weapon systems. Disable, don't destroy." The Resilience's railguns spoke again, but this time their rounds struck unprotected metal. Plasma cannon ports exploded in showers of sparks. Sensor arrays crumpled under the impact of high-speed projectiles. Within 30 seconds, the Dominance was effectively disarmed. "Trial complete," came Vek'lon's voice over the communication system. His tone was very different from before, filled with surprise and what might have been respect. "The Dominance has been rendered combat ineffective. Victory goes to the human vessel." Jake slumped back in his captain's chair, suddenly feeling exhausted. Around him, his crew was cheering and celebrating, but he could barely believe what they had just accomplished. "Incoming." "Transmission from Commander Velther," Ryan announced. The Velkari officer appeared on the main screen. His ship's bridge was dark, lit only by emergency lighting, and Jake could see damage control teams working in the background. "Captain Morrison, in 500 years of military service, I have never been defeated by a smaller vessel." Velther S. voice carried something that might have been admiration. "Your tactics are completely outside anything we have studied. How did you know our shields would fail against multiple small impacts?" "We didn't," Jake admitted. "We just tried something and hoped it would work." Velther was quiet for a long moment. "You fought a battle without knowing if your plan would succeed? That's how humans fight most of our battles. We figure it out as we go. Remarkable." The Velkari commander shook his head. "I will request permission to study your combat recordings. Perhaps we have something to learn from your people after all." After the transmission ended, Jake looked around at his crew. They had done the impossible twice in one day, but he knew the hardest test was still coming. "Danny, how are our systems?" "About half of them are held together with hope and prayer, Captain. But we're still flying, and that's what matters." "Admiral Carter to Captain Morrison," came a voice over the communication system. "Go ahead, Admiral." "Congratulations. Jake, you've gotten the attention of every species in the galaxy. But I have some bad news. The final trial has been changed. It's no longer going to be a simple combat exercise." Jake felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "Long-range sensors have detected something approaching the station. Something that shouldn't exist. The War Master is calling an emergency session of the Council. Whatever is coming, it's big enough to threaten everyone here." Jake looked out at the alien fleet surrounding the station. Ships that had seemed impossibly advanced just hours ago now looked small and fragile against the darkness of space. "How long do we have?" 6 hours, maybe less. "Jake, I think our real test is just beginning." Captain Jake Morrison stood in the council chamber watching the largest display screen he had ever seen. The image showed deep space beyond the station, where 3 massive objects were moving toward them. Each one was the size of a small moon. Covered in dark metal, it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "What are we looking at?" asked Admiral Carter, who had joined Jake and his senior officers for the emergency briefing. War Master Vek'lon's voice filled the chamber, but for the first time since Jake had met him, the Velkari leader sounded worried. "These are Devourer ships. We have not seen them for over 2,000 years. We hoped they had been destroyed or had moved beyond our galaxy." A Zephyrian scientist floated forward, her crystal body flickering with nervous energy. "The Devourers are ancient machines, created by a species that died out millions of years ago. They consume everything they encounter, learning and adapting from each civilization they destroy. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How many ships are coming? Long-range sensors show 3 primary vessels and at least 50 smaller attack craft, reported a Thorian officer. They will reach this system in approximately 4 hours. The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates from dozens of species began talking at once. Some wanted to evacuate immediately. Others called for organizing a defense. A few suggested trying to negotiate with the machines. Silence, Echelon commanded, and the room fell quiet. We must make a decision quickly. Do we flee, or do we? Stand and fight? Admiral Kreshtar, the Velkari fleet commander, stepped forward. War Master, my analysis shows that even our combined fleet cannot defeat 3 Devourer ships. These machines have had millions of years to perfect their technology. Our weapons may not even be able to damage them. Then we evacuate, said a delegate from the Nexus Collective. We can rebuild our fleets and return when we are better prepared. No, Jake heard himself saying. Every alien in the chamber turned to look at him, and he realized he had spoken louder than he intended. I mean, running away won't solve the problem. If these machines can follow us here, they can follow us anywhere. Decalon studied Jake with his glowing red eyes. What do you suggest, human? Jake looked around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces, all waiting for his answer. 3 days ago, these same beings had laughed at his ship and called it Junkyard scrap. Now they were listening to him like he might have a solution to their greatest fear. I suggest we do what humans always do when faced with impossible odds. We fight smart instead of fighting fair. Explain, Kreshtar demanded. These Devourers have been around for millions of years. They've probably fought every type of enemy, used every kind of weapon, seen every possible strategy. Jake felt his confidence growing as he spoke. But they've never fought humans. They don't know how we think or how we fight. A Zephyrian delegate's voice chimed like breaking glass. Human, your species has been in space for only 50 years. What could you possibly know about fighting ancient machines? We know about fighting. Things that are bigger and stronger than we are, Lisa Barnes said, stepping up beside Jake. We've been doing it our whole history. Danny Walsh moved forward too, oil stains still visible on his uniform. And we know about fixing things that shouldn't work and making them work anyway. Soon, Jake's entire crew was standing with him, facing down the assembled might of the galaxy. Dr. Pierce, Ryan Torres, Amy Foster, Ben Howard, all of them ready to take on an enemy that had destroyed civilizations for millions of years. What is your plan? Vikalon asked. Jake looked at his crew, then back at the War Master. We're going to give you something the Devourers have never seen before. Human engineering mixed with alien technology, all held together with hope and stubbornness. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of activity. Danny Walsh and his engineering team worked with alien scientists to modify every ship in the fleet. They stripped armor from damaged vessels and welded it onto active ships. They connected human railguns to alien power systems. They took missile guidance systems from 12 different species and somehow made them work together. Ben Howard worked with alien tactical officers to plan attacks that violated every rule of space combat. Instead of fighting in formation, the fleet would split into small groups that would hit the Devourers from every direction at once. Instead of trying to match firepower with firepower, they would use speed and confusion to stay alive. Ryan Torres linked the communication systems of every ship in the fleet, creating a network that could function even if half the vessels were destroyed. Amy Foster shared her sensor data with alien scientists, helping them understand how to track enemies that didn't want to be found. Even Dr. Pierce contributed, working with alien medical teams to prepare for casualties and set up aid stations. throughout the fleet. When the Devourers finally arrived, they came like a storm made of metal and death. The three main ships were even larger than the sensors had indicated, each one bristling with weapons that could destroy entire planets. The smaller attack craft moved in perfect formation, like a swarm of deadly insects. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison," Jake announced over the fleet communication network. "Remember, we don't have to win. We just have to survive long enough to hurt them." The battle began with the Devourer ships scanning the Allied fleet, trying to analyze their capabilities and plan the most efficient method of destruction. What they found confused their ancient minds. Ships that should not be able to fly were somehow staying in formation. Weapons that should not work were powering up successfully. And the fleet's movements followed no logical pattern. First wave. "Begin your attack." Jake ordered .50 ships from a dozen different species charged straight at the Devourer fleet. Half of them were destroyed in the first minutes of fighting, but the survivors reached their targets and unleashed weapons that the ancient machines had never encountered before. Velkari plasma cannons powered by human fusion reactors burned through Devourer armor like it was paper. Zephyrian phase weapons guided by human targeting computers struck vital systems that should have been protected. Thorian missile swarms controlled by human communication networks overwhelmed the machines. Point defense systems. But the Devourers adapted quickly, as they always had. Their return fire destroyed ship after ship, and Jake watched good beings die as their vessels exploded in brilliant flashes of light. "Second wave, move in," he commanded, his voice steady despite the fear in his heart. This time, the attack came from a completely different direction and used entirely different tactics. The Devourers tried to adapt again, but before they could adjust their defenses, a third wave hit them from yet another angle. "Danny, how are our systems holding up?" "We're down to about 30% efficiency, Captain. But we're still flying, and that's more than anyone expected." The battle raged for 2 hours. Ships were destroyed, repaired, and sent back into combat. Danny Walsh performed engineering miracles, keeping damaged vessels running with spare parts and sheer determination. The alien crews began to understand what humans meant when they talked about fighting smart instead of fighting fair. Finally, impossibly, one of the Devourer ships began to show signs of damage. Its perfect armor was scarred and broken. Its weapons fired less frequently. Most importantly, its movements became less coordinated as human-style chaos disrupted its ancient programming. "All ships, concentrate fire on the damaged Devourer." Jake ordered every weapon in the fleet open fire at once. The ancient machine, which had survived for millions of years by being stronger and smarter than its enemies, died under an assault that was neither strong nor smart, but was completely unpredictable. The remaining 2 Devourer ships paused in their attack, perhaps confused by the destruction of their companion. In that moment of hesitation, Jake made a decision that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. "All ships, ramming speed, target the nearest Devourer." "Captain, that's suicide," Lisa Barnes protested. "Maybe, but sometimes that's what it takes." The Allied fleet charged forward in one final, desperate attack. Ships crashed into the ancient machines, their crews sacrificing themselves to damage systems that could not be destroyed any other way. The Resilience, its hull patched and its systems failing, struck the lead Devourer ship just as its fusion reactor overloaded. When the explosions finally faded, 2 Devourer ships had been destroyed, and the third was fleeing into deep space. Too damaged to continue the fight. Jake found himself floating in an escape pod, watching rescue ships search for survivors among the wreckage. Half the fleet had been lost, but they had won. They had defeated an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. "Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Kreshtar," came a voice over his emergency radio. Your tactics and your technology saved us all. The Council will want to study everything you did here today." Jake smiled as he looked out at the debris field that had once been the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Somewhere in that wreckage was the Resilience, the ship they had called Junkyard Scrap. She had died fighting, held together until the end by human engineering and human courage. "Admiral, our ship may have been built from scrap metal, but our spirit was forged from something stronger. Don't forget that when you write your reports."